Sorry, Rosalia. I cut you off mid-applause. I'm so sorry. That's my bad. Hi, how are we? Yeah, I'm marking you all late. You're all late. You're all tardy to English class. Chat, I don't know if I like my new haircut. It's really something. Like, it's very layery up here, and the bangs are like, I don't know. I don't know. Like right now it's okay having it out of my face, but when it's all down, I don't know. Ah, Chirpy, I guess you're here on time. But yes, Haley, we do need to talk soon. We do need to talk soon. Um, because I want a piercing. Me and my piercings, forever. How are we? How's everybody feeling? I don't know if Moose is here yet, but I know Mimi's here. Is the banner you guys got for me? It finally shipped. It took forever to ship, but it's here. It's here. It's real cute. It's a little too big for the closet door, so like the far edge is a little ratchet and like just hanging off the side. It's fine. It's fine. You'll be here on Sunday. Yay! I'm so excited. I also, a moment for the hair feather. We're bringing back the hair feather. My stylist got the wrong kind, so this is like the fluffy kind that's kind of like fake hair, so it doesn't like style very well. So I'm not like I don't love this specific one. I'm gonna replace it with an actual like rooster feather. But we're bringing hair feathers back, okay, people? Oh, that was the thing. That was what I was gonna do today. I was gonna actually order some rooster feathers. Hang on, chat. I gotta do some online shopping real quick. Pull out your planners. Take your notes. Please turn your textbooks to the appropriate page while your teacher finishes her online shopping. Low key me as a TA though. Like, I was like, get out your books. You know what we're doing today. Your papers all sucked. Get those books back open. Who taught y'all how to write? I'm failing all of you. Me. Anyways, I can hear myself on Chirpy's phone downstairs, and it's tripping me out. He has the speaker like cranked up so I can hear myself yapping. It's throwing me. It's throwing me. Hair feathers. Hair feathers extension kit. I want like the. Yeah, this is the kind we want, Chad. This is the kind we want. That's it. That's it right there. You turn me up. Aw, Chirpy. Aw, Chirpy. Chat, we're bringing back hair feathers. It's coming back around. I need you all to get on board with this, okay? Lock in. We're going back to 2012. I don't care. I don't care, chat. I don't care. We're doing it. So lock in. Got it? Lock in. What else? What have I been feeling lately? I've been watching too much Broski Report because I'm like, let me update you on all the things I'm vibing with. This. I'm vibing with this right now. I've been drinking a whole lot of those. What else have I been vibing with? Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny always now. Um, we back in our language learning mode because I work with the general public, and the general public around here speaks a lot of Spanish. But when they come in to work with me, they have to speak English because I can't speak Spanish. Whereas it should be we're speaking Spanish because I can accommodate you instead of you having to try to accommodate me. Like, you can speak two languages. I can't speak two languages. And that's a me problem. So we back in our learning era. we back in our studying era. We back in our self-improvement rather than blaming other people era. So, we're like hard in our language department. I feel really bad cuz I re-downloaded. Hi, Hyrule. I feel really bad because I re-downloaded Duolingo, and I feel bad about Duolingo because Duolingo recently switched to their whole like AI first business model, and I don't love that. And I want to do Babbel, but Babbel doesn't have a free version. Like Babbel is subscription only, and your girl is like a little prescription or subscriptioned out at the moment, you know? So, if we have any suggestions for that, that'd be sick. So, anyway, what else, chat? What's the vibes lately? I am going to go see Wuthering Heights tomorrow night. I'm excited but not. Like, listen, it looks like it's gonna be it looks like it's gonna be something. It's really gonna be something. I love Margot Robbie. I love Jacob Elordi. Do I think either of them have any business being in a Wuthering Heights adaptation? No. Unless Jacob Elordi played Hindley, I could be okay with that. But like every director is like, no, we have to cast Jacob Elordi as our romantic lead. Heathcliff is not white. That's like one of the biggest undertones, predominant themes of the book is Heathcliff was abused and suppressed and ignored because he was a person of color in England during the slave trade. He was literally adopted from Liverpool, where the majority of the slave trade took place in England. And like all of the descriptions of him in the book, he's very much a person of color. So then they went and cast the whitest of white boys to play him. And I said, I think we're missing the point. And then the early reviews have been coming out, and dog. It's like a fever dream fan fiction from a 14-year-old who read the Spark Notes of Wuthering Heights is the vibe that I'm getting. But I will actually go watch the damn movie so that you don't have to, and we will discuss it. We will be discussing this at length. I will have thoughts. I will have a breakdown for you. I mean, I'm going to have a breakdown anyway, but also I'm going to have a breakdown of the movie. Hey, that's going to bug me. That's not lined up right. That's better. Sorry. I'm a little on edge today. We talk about this every time we do a book club, but the primal urge to just scream at the top of my lungs until I feel better. Yeah. So anyways, that's where I'm at. And I feel like we don't talk enough, chat. We don't talk to each other enough. We got to get to know each other better. So that's where I'm at. Anywho, are we about ready to read? Do you have your books open? Everybody get your books open. Do we have our copies? Who's annotating? Who annotates? I annotated once for a book club. All of my notes were, what the hell was that? Why would you say that? What the hell? I'm like, I can't possibly be doing this whole annotation thing correctly because I'm just, yeah. 45 minutes? Can I have it? Can I have a yogurt, Chirpy? Can I have a snack? Please. Get you a man who brings you snacks. Get you a man who makes you brownies when you've had a long day. Okay, you know what? There's one other thing that I don't know if we've discussed yet. Men, boys, he/hims, come sit your happy asses down at the front of the class. We gotta have a conversation for a second. I'll give you a second to get situated. Let me know. You ready? Okay. Now that the he/hims have made their way to the front of the class. If you see a woman in a professional, you know what? If you see anybody, and especially the girly pops, if you see us in a professional work environment, we're doing our jobs, especially customer service. But if you see us working, doing our jobs, first of all, thank you for the yogurt. Second of all, if you see us in our professional work environment, especially customer service, and we're in the zone, we are being paid to be nice to you. That is not an invitation to flirt with us. That's not an invitation. That is not your shot to hit on us. You're putting us in a very bad situation. You're putting us in an uncomfortable position because, again, we're being paid to be nice to you. Our job is literally requiring that we are polite, that we provide good customer service. You are then creating this power dynamic where you're basically holding us hostage by flirting with us when we are just trying to work, when we are just trying to do our job. So don't do that. Do not flirt with a woman when she is in her professional work environment. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's icky. It's weird. Don't do it. Knock it off. If she working, that's not your time. That's not your moment. Got it? Okay, cool. Glad we had this chat. I have not eaten today, so I'm gonna be sitting here eating my Yoplait while we read. Is that cool? It's gonna have to be cool, okay? Anywho. Okay, everybody get out your books. Turn to part 2, chapter 2. Oh, let's get going. Let's just get cooking, okay? Alrighty. Good chat. Let's go. Winston picked his way up the lane, through the dappled light and shade, stepping out into pools of gold wherever the boughs parted. Under the trees to the left of them, the ground was misty with bluebells. The air seemed to kiss one's skin. It was the 2nd of May. From somewhere deeper in the heart of the wood came the droning of ring-doves. He was a bit early. There had been no difficulties about the journey, and the girl was so evidently experienced that he was less frightened than he would normally have been. Presumably, she could be trusted to find a safe place. In general, you could not assume that you were much safer in the country than in London. There were no telescreens, of course, but there was always the danger of concealed microphones by which your voice might be picked up and recognized. Besides, it was not easy to make a journey by yourself without attracting attention. For distances of less than 100 kilometers, it was not necessary to get your passport endorsed. But sometimes there were patrols hanging about the railway stations, who examined the papers of any party member they found there and asked awkward questions. However, no patrols had appeared, and on the walk from the station he had made sure by cautious backward glances that he was not being followed. The train was full of proles, in holiday mood because of the summery weather. The wooden-seated carriage in which he traveled was filled to overflowing by a single enormous family, ranging from a toothless great-grandmother to a month-old baby going out to spend an afternoon with in-laws in the country, and as they freely explained to Winston, to get hold of a little black market butter. The lane widened, and in a minute he came to the footpath she had told him of, a mere cattle track which plunged between the bushes. He had no watch, but it could not be 15 yet. The bluebells were so thick underfoot that it was impossible not to tread on them. He knelt down and began picking some, partly to pass the time away, but also from a vague idea that he would like to have a bunch of flowers to offer the girl when they met. He had got together a big bunch and was smelling their faint, sickly scent when a sound at his back froze him, the unmistakable crackle of a foot on twigs. He went on picking bluebells. It was the best thing to do. It might be the girl, or he might have been followed after all. To look round was to show guilt. He picked another and another. A hand fell lightly on his shoulder. He looked up. It was the girl. She shook her head, evidently as a warning that he must keep silent, then parted the bushes and quickly led the way along the narrow track into the wood. Obviously she had been that way before, for she dodged the boggy pits as though by habit. Winston followed, still clasping his bunch of flowers. His first feeling was relief, but as he watched the strong, slender body moving in front of him, with the scarlet sash that was just tight enough to bring out the curve of her hips, the sense of his own inferiority was heavy upon him. Even now, it seemed quite likely that when she turned round and looked at him, she would draw back after all. The sweetness of the air and the greenness of the leaves daunted him. Already, on the walk from the station, the May sunshine had made him feel dirty and etiolated, a creature of indoors, with the sooty dust of London in the pores of his skin. It occurred to him that till now she had probably never seen him in broad daylight in the open. They came to the fallen tree that she had spoken of. The girl hopped over the fence, and forced apart the bushes, in which there did not seem to be an opening. When Winston followed her, he found that they were in a natural clearing, a tiny grassy knoll surrounded by tall saplings that shut it in completely. The girl stopped and turned. "Here we are," she said. He was facing her at several paces' distance. As yet he did not dare move nearer to her. "I didn't want to say anything in the lane," she went on, "in case there's a Mike hidden there. I don't suppose there is, but there could be. There's always the chance of one of those swine recognizing your voice. We're all right here." He still had not the courage to approach her. "We're all right here?" he repeated stupidly. "Yes, look at the trees." They were small ashes, which at some time had been cut down and had sprouted up again into a forest of poles, none of them thicker than one's wrist. "There's nothing big enough to hide a Mike in. Besides, I've been here before." They were only making conversation. He had managed to move closer to her now. She stood before him very upright, with a smile on her face that looked faintly ironical, as though she were wondering why he was so slow to act. The bluebells had cascaded on the ground. They seemed to have fallen of their own accord. He took her hand. "Would you believe," he said, "that till this moment I didn't know what color your eyes were?" "They were brown," he noted, "a rather light shade of brown with dark lashes." "Now that you've seen what I'm really like, can you still bear to look at me?" "Yes, easily." "I'm 39 years old. I've got a wife that I can't get rid of. I've got varicose veins. I've got 5 false teeth." "I couldn't care less," said the girl. The next moment, it was hard to say by whose act, she was in his arms. At the beginning, he had no feeling except sheer incredulity. The youthful body was strained against his own. The mass of dark hair was against his face, and yes, actually she had turned her face up, and he was kissing the wide red mouth. She had clasped her arms about his neck. She was calling him darling, precious one, loved one. He had pulled her down. Hi, Dash. He had pulled her down to the ground. She was utterly unresisting. He could do whatever he liked with her, but the truth was that he had no physical sensation except that of mere contact. All he felt was incredulity and pride. He was glad that this was happening, but he had no physical desire. It was too soon. Her youth and prettiness had frightened him. He was too much used to living without women. He did not know the reason. The girl picked herself up and pulled a bluebell out of her hair. She sat against him, putting her arm around his waist. "Never mind, dear, there's no hurry. We've got the whole afternoon. Isn't this a splendid hideout? I found it when I got lost once on a community hike. If anyone was coming, you could hear them 100 meters away." "What is your name?" said Winston. "Julia. I know yours. It's Winston. Winston Smith." "How did you find that out?" "I expect I'm better at finding things out than you are, dear. Tell me, what did you think of me before that day I gave you the note?" He did not feel any temptation to tell lies to her. It was even a sort of love offering to start off by telling the worst. I hated the sight of you, he said. I wanted to rape you and then murder you afterwards. 2 weeks ago, I thought seriously of smashing your head in with a cobblestone. If you really want to know, I imagine that you had something to do with the thought police. The girl laughed delightedly. That's quite a take, dear. Maybe we should be concerned. Maybe if a guy says that that's his first impression of you, you should be worried. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. Anyways, the girl laughed delightedly, evidently taking this as a tribute to the excellence of her disguise. Not the thought police. You didn't honestly think that. Well, perhaps not exactly that. But from your general appearance, merely because you're young and fresh and healthy, you understand. I thought that probably you thought I was a good party member, pure in word and deed. Banners, processions, slogans, games, community hikes, all that stuff. And you thought that if I had a quarter of a chance, I'd denounce you as a thought criminal and get you killed off? Yes, something of that kind. A great many young girls are like that, you know. Yeah, exactly, Chirpy, exactly. It's this bloody thing that does it, she said, ripping off the scarlet sash of the Junior Anti-Sex League and flinging it onto the bow. Then, as though touching her waist had reminded her of something, she felt in the pocket of her overalls and produced a small slab of chocolate. She broke it in half and gave one of the pieces to Winston. Even before he had taken it, he knew by the smell that it was very unusual chocolate. It was dark and shiny, and it was wrapped in silver paper. Chocolate normally was dull brown, crumbly stuff that tasted, as nearly as one could describe it, like the smoke of a rubbish fire. But at some time or another he had tasted chocolate like the piece she had given him. The first whiff of its scent had stirred up some memory which he could not pin down, but which was powerful and troubling. Where did you get this stuff? He said. Black market, she said indifferently. Actually, I am that sort of girl to look at it. I'm good at games. I was a troop leader in the Spies. I do voluntary work 3 evenings a week for the Junior Anti-Sex League. Hours and hours I've spent pasting their bloody rot all over London. I always carry one end of a banner in the processions. I always look cheerful and I never shirk anything. Always yell with the crowd, that's what I say. It's the only way to be safe. The first fragment of chocolate had melted on Winston's tongue. The taste was delightful, but there was still that memory moving around the edges of his consciousness, something strongly felt but not reducible to definite shape, like an object seen out of the corner of one's eye. He pushed it away from him, aware only that it was the memory of some action which he would have liked to undo but could not. You are very young, he said. You are 10 or 15 years younger than I am. What could you see to attract you in a man like me? It was something in your face. I thought I'd take a chance. I'm good at spotting people who don't belong. As soon as I saw you, I knew you were against them. Them, it appeared, meant the party, and above all, the inner party, about whom she was talking with an open jeering hatred, which made Winston feel uneasy, although he knew that they were safe here, if they could be safe anywhere. A thing that astonished him about her was the coarseness of her language. Party members were not supposed to swear, and Winston himself very seldom did swear aloud, at any rate. Julia, however, seemed unable to mention the party, and especially the inner party, without using the kind of words that you saw chalked up in dripping alleyways. He did not dislike it. It was merely one symptom of her revolt against the party and all its ways, and somehow it seemed natural and healthy, like the sneeze of a horse that smells bad hay. They had left the clearing and were wandering again through the checkered shade, with their arms round each other's waists whenever it was wide enough to walk two abreast. He noticed how much softer her waist seemed to feel now that the sash was gone. They did not speak above a whisper. Outside the clearing, Julia said it was better to go quietly. Presently they had reached the edge of the little wood. She stopped him. Don't go out into the open. There might be someone watching. We're all right if we keep behind the boughs. They were standing in the shade of hazel bushes. The sunlight, filtering through innumerable leaves, was still hot on their faces. Winston looked out into the field beyond, and underwent a curious, slow shock of recognition. He knew it by sight. An old, close-bitten pasture, with a footpath wandering across it, and a molehill here and there. And the ragged hedge on the opposite side, The boughs of the elm trees swayed just perceptibly in the breeze, and their leaves stirred faintly in dense masses like women's hair. Surely somewhere nearby, but out of sight, there must be a stream with green pools where dace were swimming. Isn't there a stream somewhere near here? He whispered. That's right, there is a stream. It's at the edge of the next field, actually. There are fish in it, great big ones. You can watch them lying in the pools under the willow trees, waving their tails. It's the golden country, almost, he murmured. The golden country? It's nothing, really. A landscape I've seen sometimes in a dream. Look, whispered Julia. A thrush had alighted on a bough not 5 meters away, almost at the level of their faces. Perhaps it had not seen them. It was in the sun, they in the shade. It spread out its wings, fitted them carefully into place again, ducked its head for a moment, as though making a sort of obeisance, to the sun, and then began to pour forth a torrent of song. In the afternoon hush, the volume of sound was startling. Winston and Julia clung together, fascinated. The music went on, after minute, with astonishing variations, never once repeating itself, almost as though the bird were deliberately showing off its virtuosity. Sometimes it stopped for a few seconds, spread out and resettled its wings, then swelled its speckled breast and again burst into song. Winston watched it with a sort of vague reverence. For whom, for what was that bird singing? No mate, no rival was watching it. What made it sit at the edge of the lonely wood and pour its music into nothingness? He wondered whether, after all, there was a microphone hidden somewhere nearby. He and Julia had only spoken in low whispers, and it would not pick up what they had said, but it would pick up the thrush. Perhaps at the other end of the instrument some small, beetle-like man was listening intently. Listening to that. But by degrees, the flood of music drove all speculations out of his mind. It was as though it were a kind of liquid stuff that poured all over him and got mixed up with the sunlight that filtered through the leaves. He stopped thinking and merely felt. The girl's waist in the bend of his arm was warm and soft. He pulled her around so that they were breast to breast. Her body seemed to melt into his. Wherever his hands moved, it was all as yielding as water. Their mouths clung together. It was quite different from the hard kisses they had exchanged earlier. When they moved their faces apart again, both of them sighed deeply. The bird took fright and fled with a clatter of wings. Winston put his lips against her ear. Now, he whispered. Not here, she whispered back. Come back to the hideout. It's safer. Quickly, with an occasional crackle of twigs, they threaded their way back to the clearing. When they were once inside the ring of saplings, she turned and faced him. They were both breathing fast, but the smile had reappeared round the corners of her mouth. She stood looking at him for an instant, then felt at the zipper of her overalls, and yes, it was almost as his dream. Almost as swiftly as he had imagined it, she had torn her clothes off, and when she flung them aside, it was with that same magnificent gesture by which a whole civilization seemed to be annihilated. Her body gleamed white in the sun. But for a moment he did not look at her body. His eyes were anchored by the freckled face, with its faint, bold smile. He knelt down before her and took her hands in his. Have you done this before? Of course. Hundreds of times. Well, scores of times, anyway. With party members? Yes, always with party members. With members of the inner party? No, not with those swine, no. But there's plenty that would if they got half a chance. They're not so holy as they make out. His heart leapt. Scores of times she had done it. He wished it had been hundreds, thousands. Anything that hinted at corruption always filled him with a wild hope. Who knew? Perhaps the party was rotten under the surface, its cult of strenuousness and self-denial simply a sham concealing iniquity. If he could have infected the whole lot of them with leprosy or syphilis, how gladly he would have done so. Anything to rot, to weaken, to undermine. He pulled her down so they were kneeling face to face. Listen, the more men you've had, the more I love you. Do you understand that? Yes, perfectly. I hate purity. I hate goodness. I don't want any virtue to exist anywhere. I want everyone to be corrupt to the bones. Well, then I ought to suit you, dear. I'm corrupt to the bones. You like doing this. I don't mean simply me. I mean the thing itself. I adore it. That was above all what he wanted to hear. Not merely the love of one person, but the animal instinct, the simple, undifferentiated desire. That was the force that would tear the party to pieces. He pressed her down upon the grass among the fallen bluebells. This time there was no difficulty. Presently, the rising and falling of their breasts slowed to normal speed, and in a sort of pleasant helplessness they fell apart. The sun seemed to have grown hotter. They were both sleepy. He reached out for the discarded overalls and pulled them partly over her. Almost immediately, they fell asleep and slept for about half an hour. Winston woke first. He sat and watched the freckled face, still peacefully asleep, pillowed on the palm of her hand. Except for her mouth, you could not call her beautiful. There was a line or two round the eyes if you looked closely. The short dark hair was extraordinarily thick and soft. It occurred to him that he still did not know her surname or where she lived. The young, strong body, now helpless in sleep, awoke in him a pitying, protecting feeling. But the mindless tenderness that he had felt under the hazel tree, while the thrush was singing, had not quite come back. He pulled the overalls aside and studied her smooth white flank. In the old days, he thought, a man looked at a girl's body and saw that it was desirable, and that was the end of the story. But now you could not have pure love or pure lust nowadays. No emotion was pure, because everything was mixed up with fear and hatred. Their embrace had been a battle, the climax of victory. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act. That's tea. That's tea. It's interesting that this book being written when it would have a passage like that. But also now we can see why this book is banned so frequently. Because it's like, hey, by the way, did you know that purity culture is actually just a means to control women? Did you know that? Did you know that? And again, crazy that we're reading this right now. Comes at a very fitting time where we're discovering that all of the party members in our current day and age have been pushing purity culture and virtue so hard because they want the beauty standards of women to be that of children. They want women to be as young looking as possible, as small as possible, as virtuous as possible. And now we know why. Now we know why. It was all about control and pedophilia. I said it and I meant it. It's terrifying how deeply relevant this book is today. It's terrifying. We are literally watching all of this happen. In real time. In real time, we're watching this unfold. Where we're seeing exactly why purity culture has been pushed so heavily on all of us. Because a woman who does not give a shit about what a man wants her body to look like and has autonomy and pride in her own pleasure and decision making, that's a threat. That's a threat to the patriarchy, you know? But if they can trick us into wanting to starve ourselves and be small and skinny and helpless and young, and you know, we're too worried about the wrinkles around our eyes, then they can get away with whatever they want. I'm just drawing parallels here. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, all right. That was the end of chapter 2. This yogurt is like really hitting. I'm in a mood today. I'm in a mood. It's a good thing that today is not Shap Day, because if Acid and I were podcasting, ooh, I'd be popping off. I'm in a mood. I am like animalistically angry today at the universe and the world at large. I don't know. Chad, I hope you have some good snacks. I love book club. I love book club with snacks. Snacks hit. What's your favorite flavor of yogurt, and why is it orange cream? Because it better be orange cream. Okay, you know what? We're gonna have a tangent for a second. Because now I'm going. Back to the whole. It's the revival of heroin chic, right? Like, all of the ads that we see nowadays are for weight loss, gambling, AI, or crypto. And part of that is how hard we're pushing and marketing the need for everything to be protein based. Have you guys seen this shit? Like protein water, protein popcorn, protein Pop-Tarts? Are you actually joking me? No ordinary person needs that much protein in their day. You simply do not. You simply do not. Protein yogurt, you know what? First of all, that shit tastes like chalk. Have you guys had this like 000 Oikos stuff? I think that's what I'm thinking of. It's like zero sugar, zero carb, dairy free. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's the 000 Oikos, and it's like hella protein packed and like hella healthy. It tastes like chalk. First of all, why is anyone eating this? And second of all, regular yogurt has protein. Regular yogurt has protein. But they trick us into thinking that we need more protein in our day and everything has to be protein packed so that they can charge us more. And I'm sorry, I do not ever want to consume something called protein mac and cheese. Like, go straight to hell with that shit. How much protein does this thing have? This little tiny cup has 5 grams of protein. That's not bad. That's not bad. And it's just a regular ass yogurt. 140 calories. A little high in sugar. 13 grams of added sugar, 19 grams total. A little high, but it tastes good. It tastes good, so I actually want to eat it. And 5 grams of protein. Tell me why I need protein water with this. Do not show me a bottle of protein water or I will throw it at you. Like, what the hell is that? How do you make a protein water anyways? What is that? You know that can't taste good, and you know it must have so many shitty chemicals in it. Just do what the rest of us did and drink your shitty whey protein shakes when you go to the gym. Have a Kodak pancake, because those things are pretty good. The Kodiak pancakes? Those things are pretty good. Or like a Fairlife protein drink. Those are pretty good. You don't need protein water. Whoever is selling you protein water, they are liars and they are assholes. Also, look at the nutrition label on a protein Pop-Tart. It has so much sugar and carbs in it, and the amount of protein it's pushing is so minimal. Like, just eat a regular Pop-Tart and then have like some eggs or something with it. Drink a glass of milk. Like, it's comparable. Anyway. They're using scare tactics in health to control us and to take all of our money, so don't fall for it. Okay, thanks. All right, back to the book. Chapter 3. I need to take a breath. Okay, I'm good, I swear. Okay. We can come here once again, said Julia. It's generally safe to use any hideout twice, but not for another month or 2, of course. As soon as she woke up, her demeanor had changed. She became alert and businesslike, put her clothes on, knotted the scarlet sash about her waist, and began arranging the details of the journey home. It seemed natural to leave this to her. She obviously had a practical cunning which Winston lacked, and she seemed also to have an exhaustive knowledge of the countryside round London, stored away from innumerable community hikes. The route she gave him was quite different from the one by which he had come, and brought him out at a different railway station. Never go home the same way as you went out, she said, as though enunciating an important general principle. She would leave first, and Winston was to wait half an hour before following her. She had named a place where they could meet after work, 4 evenings hence. It was a street in one of the poorer quarters, where there was an open market which was generally crowded and noisy. She would be hanging about among the stalls, pretending to be in search of shoelaces or sewing thread. If she judged that the coast was clear, she would blow her nose when he approached. Otherwise, he was to walk past her without recognition. But with luck, in the middle of the crowd, it would be safe to talk for a quarter of an hour and arrange another meeting. "And now I must go," she said as soon as he had mastered his instructions. "I'm due back at 19:30. I've got to put in 2 hours for the Junior Anti-Sex League, handing out leaflets or something. Isn't it bloody? Give me a brush down, would you? Have I got any twigs in my hair? Are you sure? Then goodbye, my love, goodbye." She flung herself into his arms, kissed him almost violently, and a moment later pushed her way through the saplings and disappeared into the wood with very little noise. Even now he had not found out her surname or her address. However, it made no difference, for it was inconceivable that they could ever meet indoors or exchange any kind of written communication. As it happened, they never went back to the clearing in the wood. During the month of May, there was only one further occasion on which they actually succeeded in making love. That was in another hiding place known to Julia, the belfry of a ruined church in an almost deserted stretch of country where an atomic bomb had fallen 30 years earlier. It was a good hiding place when once you got there, but the getting there was very dangerous. For the rest, they could meet only in the streets in a different place every evening, and never for more than half an hour at a time. In the street, it was usually possible to talk after a fashion. As they drifted down the crowded pavements, not quite abreast and never looking at one another, they carried on a curious intermittent conversation which flicked on and off like the beams of a lighthouse, suddenly nipped into silence by the approach of a party uniform or the proximity of a telescreen, then taken up again minutes later in the middle of a sentence, then abruptly cut short as they parted at the agreed spot, then continued almost without introduction on the following day. Julia appeared to be quite used to this kind of conversation, which she called talking by installments. She was also surprisingly adept at speaking without moving her lips. Just once in almost a month of nightly meetings, they managed to exchange a kiss. They were passing in silence down a side street. Julia would never speak when they were away from the main streets. When there was a deafening roar, the earth heaved and the air darkened, and Winston found himself lying on his side, bruised and terrified. A rocket bomb must have dropped quite near at hand. Suddenly he became aware of Julia's face a few centimeters from his own, deathly white as chalk. Even her lips were white. She was dead. He clasped her against him and found that he was kissing a live, warm face. But there was some powdery stuff that got in the way of his lips. Both of their faces were thickly coated with plaster. There were evenings when they reached their rendezvous and then had to walk past one another without a sign because a patrol had just come round the corner or a helicopter was hovering overhead. Even if it had been less dangerous, it would still have been difficult to find time to meet. Winston's working week was 60 hours. Julia's was even longer, and their free days varied according to the pressure of work and did not often coincide. Julia, in any case, seldom had an evening completely free. She spent an astonishing amount of time in attending lectures and demonstrations, distributing literature for the Junior Anti-Sex League, preparing banners for Hate Week, making collections for the Savings Campaign, and such like activities. It was paid, she said. It was camouflage. It paid. Okay, I understand. I read that with the wrong inflection. It paid, she said. It was camouflage. If you kept the small rules, you could break the big ones. She even induced Winston to mortgage yet another of his evenings by enrolling himself for the part-time munition work, which was done voluntarily by zealous party members. So one evening every week, Winston spent 4 hours of paralyzing boredom, screwing together small bits of metal, which were probably parts of bomb fuses, in a drafty, ill-lit workshop where the knocking of hammers mingled drearily with the music of the telescreens. When they met in the church tower, the gaps in their fragmentary conversations were filled up. It was a blazing afternoon. The air in the little square chamber above the bells was hot and stagnant, and smelled overpoweringly of pigeon dung. How romantic. They sat talking for hours on the dusty, twig-littered floor, one or the other of them getting up from time to time to cast a glance through the narrow slits and make sure that no one was coming. Julia was 26 years old. She lived in a hostel with 30 other girls. always in the stink of women. How I hate women, she said parenthetically. And she worked, as he had guessed, on the novel writing machines in the fiction department. She enjoyed her work, which consisted chiefly in running and servicing a powerful but tricky electric motor. She was not clever, but was fond of using her hands and felt at home with machinery. She could describe the whole process of composing a novel, from the general directive using the planning committee down to the final touching up by the rewrite squad. But she was not interested in the finished product. She didn't much care for reading, she said. Books were just a commodity that had been produced, like jam or bootlaces. Okay, so wait, we gotta pause here. Because this is interesting. Their novels are being produced by a machine through simple input. I'm sorry, this sounds like he was predicting AI. Like, the planning committee gave them a prompt. They put that prompt into the machine. The machine then composed a novel. I'm going to have an aneurysm reading this book. Jeez. Anyway, she had no memories of anything before the early 60s, and the only person she had ever known who talked frequently of the days before the revolution was a grandfather who had disappeared when she was 8. At school, she had been captain of the hockey team and had won the gymnastics trophy 2 years running. She had been a troop leader in the Spies and a branch secretary in the Youth League before joining the Junior Anti-Sex League. She had always borne an excellent character. She had, even an infallible mark of good reputation, been picked out to work in Pornosec, the subsection of the fiction department, which turned out cheap pornography for distribution among the proles. It was nicknamed Muck House by the people who worked in it, she remarked. Then there she had remained for a year, helping to produce booklets in sealed packets with titles like Spanking Stories or One Night in a Girls' School. Wow. To be bought furtively by proletarian youths who were under the impression that they were buying something illegal. So they're mass producing bad, cheap porn and distributing it in a way to make them think they're rebelling, but they are still fully under the party's control. This book, y'all. What? Oh, man. Okay. What are these books like? Said Winston curiously. Oh, ghastly rubbish. They're boring, really. They only have 6 plots, but they swap them around a bit. Of course, I was only on the kaleidoscopes. I was never in the rewrite squad. I'm not literary, dear. Not even enough for that. He learned with astonishment that all the workers in Pornosec, except the head of the department, were girls. The theory was that men, whose sex instincts were less controllable than those of women, were in greater danger of being corrupted by the filth they handled. They don't even like having married women there, she added. Girls are always supposed to be so pure. What did I say? Girls are always supposed to be so pure. Here's one who isn't, anyway. She had had her first love affair when she was 16 with a party member of 60 who later committed suicide to avoid arrest. And a good job, too, said Julia. Otherwise, they'd have had my name out of him when he confessed. Since there had been various others, life as she saw was quite simple. You wanted a good time. They, meaning the party, wanted to stop you having it. You broke the rules as best you could. She seemed to think it just as natural that they should want to rob you of your pleasures as that you should want to avoid being caught. She hated the party and said so in the crudest words, but she made no general criticism of it. Except where it touched upon her own life, she had no interest in party doctrine. He noticed that she never used newspeak words except the ones that had passed into everyday use. She had never heard of the Brotherhood and refused to believe in its existence. Any kind of organization revolt against the party, which was bound to be a failure, struck her as stupid. The clever thing was to break the rules and stay alive at the same time. He wondered vaguely how many others like her there might be in the younger generation. People who had grown up in the world of the revolution, knowing nothing else, accepting the party as something unalterable, like the sky, not rebelling against its authority, but simply evading it, as a rabbit dodges a dog. They did not discuss the possibility of getting married. It was too remote to be worth thinking about. No imaginable committee would even sanction such a marriage, even if Catherine, Winston's wife, could somehow have been got rid of. It was hopeless even as a daydream. "What was she like, your wife?" said Julia. "She was... Do you know the Newspeak word good thinkful? Meaning naturally orthodox, incapable of thinking a bad thought?" "No, I didn't know the word, but I know the kind of person, right enough." He began telling her the story of his married life. But curiously enough, she appeared to know the essential parts of it already. She described to him, almost as though she had seen or felt it, the stiffening of Catherine's body as soon as he touched her, the way in which she still seemed to be pushing him from her with all her strength, even when her arms were clasped tightly round him. I can't speak today. Holy cow. With Julia, he felt no difficulty in talking about such things. Catherine, in any case, had long ceased to be a painful memory, and become merely a distasteful one. "I could have stood it if it hadn't been for one thing," he said. He told her about the frigid little ceremony that Catherine had forced him to go through on the same night every week. She hated it, but nothing would make her stop doing it. She used to call it, but you'll never guess. "Our duty to the party," said Julia promptly. "How did you know that?" "I've been at school too, dear. Sex talks once a month for the over 16s, and in the youth movement. They rub it into you for years. I dare say it works in a lot of cases, but of course you can never tell. People are such hypocrites." She began to enlarge upon the subject. With Julia, everything came back to her own sexuality. As soon as this was touched upon in any way, she was capable of great acuteness. Unlike Winston, she had grasped the inner meaning of the party's sexual puritanism. It was not merely that the sex instinct created a world of its own which was outside the party's control, and which therefore had to be destroyed if possible. What was more important was that sexual privation induced hysteria, which was desirable because it could be transformed into war fever and leader worship. The way she put it was, "When you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy and don't give a damn for anything. They can't bear you to feel like that. They want you to be bursting with energy all the time. All this marching up and down and cheering and waving flags is simply sex gone sour. If you're happy inside yourself, why should you get excited about Big Brother and the 3-year plans and the 2 minutes hate and all the rest of their bloody rot?" That was very true, he thought. There was a direct, intimate connection between chastity and political orthodoxy. For how could the fear, the hatred, and the lunatic credulity which the party needed in its members be kept at the right pitch except by bottling down some powerful instinct and using it as a driving force? The sex impulse was dangerous to the party, and the party had turned it to account. They had played a similar trick with the instinct of parenthood. The family could not actually be abolished, and indeed people were encouraged to be fond of their children in almost the old-fashioned way. The children, on the other hand, were systematically turned against their parents and taught to spy on them and report their deviations. The family had become, in effect, an extension of the thought police. It was a device by means of which everyone could be surrounded night and day by informers who knew him intimately. Abruptly his mind went back to Catherine. Catherine would unquestionably have denounced him to the thought police if she had not happened to be too stupid to detect the unorthodoxy of his opinions. But what really recalled her to him at this moment was the stifling heat of the afternoon, which had brought the sweat out on his forehead. He began telling Julia of something that had happened, or rather had failed to happen, on another sweltering summer afternoon 11 years ago. It was 3 or 4 months after they were married. They had lost their way on a community hike somewhere in Kent. They had only lagged behind the others for a couple minutes. "Hey, Chirpy." There is a timer going off downstairs. I don't know if you heard it. They had only lagged behind the others for a couple of minutes, but they took a wrong turning and presently found themselves pulling up short by the edge of an old chalk quarry. It was a sheer drop of 10 or 20 meters, with boulders at the bottom. There was nobody of whom they could ask the way. As soon as they realized that they were lost, Catherine became very uneasy. To be away from the noisy mob of hikers, even for a moment, gave her a feeling of wrongdoing. She wanted to hurry back the way they had come and start searching in the other direction. But at this moment, Winston noticed some tufts of loose strife growing in the cracks of the cliff beneath them. One tuft was of two colors, magenta and brick red, apparently growing on the same root. He had never seen anything of that kind before, and he called to Catherine to come and look at it. "Look, Catherine, look at those flowers. That clump down near the bottom. Do you see they're two different colors?" She had already turned to go, but she did rather fretfully come back for a moment. She even leaned out over the cliff face to see where he was pointing. He was standing a little behind her, and he put his hand on her waist to steady her. At this moment, it suddenly occurred to him how completely alone they were. There was not a human creature anywhere, not a leaf stirring, not even a bird awake. In a place like this, the danger that there would be a hidden microphone was very small, and even if there was a microphone, it would only pick up sounds. It was the hottest, sleepiest hour of the afternoon. The sun blazed down upon them, the sweat tickled his face, and the thought struck him. "Why didn't you give her a good shove?" said Julia. "I would have." "Yes, dear, you would have. I would have, if I'd been the same person then as I am now. Or perhaps I would. I'm not certain." "Are you sorry you didn't?" "Yes, on the whole, I'm sorry I didn't." They were sitting side by side on the dusty floor. He pulled her closer against him. Her head rested on his shoulder, the pleasant smell of her hair conquering the pigeon dung. She was very young, he thought. She still expected something from life. She did not understand that to push an inconvenient person over a cliff solves nothing. "Actually, it would have made no difference," he said. "Then why are you sorry you didn't do it?" "Only because I prefer a positive to a negative. In this game that we're playing, we can't win. Some kinds of failure are better than other kinds, that's all." He felt her shoulders give a wriggle of dissent. She always contradicted him when he said anything of this kind. She would not accept it as a law of nature that the individual is always defeated. In a way, she realized that she herself was doomed, that sooner or later the thought police would catch her and kill her. But with another part of her mind, she believed that it was somehow possible to construct a secret world in which you could live as you chose. All you needed was luck and cunning and boldness. She did not understand that there was no such thing as happiness, that the only victory lay in the far future, long after you were dead, that from the moment of declaring war on the party, it was better to think of yourself as a corpse. "We are the dead," he said. "We're not dead yet," said Julia prosaically. "Not physically. 6 months, a year, 5 years, conceivably. I am afraid of death. You are young, so presumably you're more afraid of it than I am. Obviously, we shall put it off as long as we can, but it makes very little difference. So long as human beings stay human, death and life are the same thing." "Oh, rubbish. Which would you rather sleep with, me or a skeleton?" "Don't you enjoy being alive? Don't you like this feeling? This is me. This is my hand. This is my leg. I'm real. I'm solid. I'm alive. Don't you like this?" She twisted herself round and pressed her bosom against him. He could feel her breasts, ripe and firm, through her overalls. Her body seemed to be pouring some of its youth and vigor into his. "Yes, I like that," he said. "Then stop talking about dying. And now listen, dear, we've got to fix up about the next time we meet. We may as well go back to the place in the wood. We've given it a good long rest. But you must get there by a different way this time. I've got it all planned out. You take the train, but look, I'll draw it out for you." And in her practical way, she scraped together a small square of dust, and with a twig from a pigeon's nest, began drawing a map on the floor. And that was chapter 3. Chapter 3 of part 2. I wonder how many parts there are. At least 3, it looks like. At least 3 parts. How's everybody doing? I just need to stretch for a second. My theory, y'all gotta keep in mind, I don't know anything about this book. Don't know any of the plot, don't know any of that, don't know how it ends. My theory, she's gonna end up dead, I think. She's gonna end up dead sooner rather than later. There's no way they both make it out of this alive. They talk too much about how easy it is to get caught and killed. I'm not feeling optimistic for her. I like her. I'm not feeling optimistic for her. Also, some of their mentalities about things are very interesting. And it's just a product of their weird, bizarre culture. But her approach to rebellion still feels like, I don't know, controlled? I like her. That's my point. I like her. But the culture and the world building is very interesting and also terrifying because there's too many parallels. There's too many. I don't like that at all. Okay. Let's do chapter 4. Get cozy. Okay. Chapter 4. Winston looked around the shabby little room above Mr. Charrington's shop. Beside the window, the enormous bed was made up with ragged blankets and a coverless bolster. The old-fashioned clock with the 12-hour face was ticking away in the mantelpiece. In the corner, on the gate-legged table, the glass paperweight, which he had bought on his last visit, gleamed softly out of the half-darkness. In the fender was a battered tin oil stove, a saucepan, and 2 cups provided by Mr. Charrington. Winston lit the burner and set a pan of water to boil. He had brought an envelope full of Victory coffee and some saccharin tablets. The clock's hand said 7:20. It was 19:20, really. She was coming at 19:30. Folly, folly, his heart kept saying. Conscious, gratuitous, suicidal folly. Of all the crimes that a party member could commit, this one was the least possible to conceal. Actually, the idea had first floated into his head in the form of a vision of the glass paperweight mirrored by the surface of the gate-legged table. As he had foreseen, Mr. Charrington had made no difficulty about letting the room. He was obviously glad of the few dollars that it would bring him, nor did he seem shocked or become offensively knowing when it was made clear that Winston wanted the room for the purpose of a love affair. Instead, he looked into the middle distance and spoke in generalities, with so delicate an air as to give the impression that he had become partly invisible. Hi, Titi. Did I hug Soul again? Oh no, is Soul's stream having problems? Oh no. Okay, anyways. Privacy, he said, was a very valuable thing. Everyone wanted a place where they could be alone occasionally, and when they had such a place, it was only common courtesy in anyone else who knew of it to keep his knowledge to himself. He even, seeming almost to fade out of existence as he did so, added that there were 2 entries to the house, one of them through the backyard, which gave on an alley. Under the window, somebody was singing. Winston peeped out, secure in the protection of the muslin curtain. The June sun was still high in the sky, and in the sun-filled court below, a monstrous woman, solid as a Norman pillar, with brawny red forearms and a sacking apron strapped about her middle, was stumping to and fro between a washtub and a clothesline, pegging out a series of square white things, which Winston recognized as babies' diapers. Whenever her mouth was not corked with clothes pegs, she was singing in a powerful contralto. It was only an opeless fancy. It passed like an... Oh, this is difficult to read, y'all. It was only an opeless fancy. It passed like an April dye. But a look and a word blurred, and the dreams they stirred, they have stolen my OI. Trying to write an accent, it never goes well. Like trying to read Joseph's dialogue in Wuthering Heights, you kind of just have to like not really read it and just skim it as fast as you can, and your brain kind of registers the correct information, and you're like, yeah, close enough. That's how that's like, just tell me that it's a sort of Cockney style accent and I will get the gist. Don't make me read an accent like that. That's just rude. The tune had been haunting London for weeks past. It was one of countless similar songs published for the benefit of the proles by a subsection of the music department. The words of these songs were composed without any human intervention whatever on an instrument known as a versificator. But the woman sang so tunefully as to turn the dreadful rubbish into an almost pleasant sound. He could hear the woman singing and the scrape of her shoes on the flagstones, and the cries of the children in the street, and somewhere in the far distance a faint roar of traffic. And yet the room seemed curiously silent, thanks to the absence of a telescreen. Folly, 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 he thought again. It was inconceivable that they could frequent this place for more than a few weeks without being caught. But the temptation of having a hiding place that was truly their own, indoors and near at hand, had been too much for both of them. For some time after their visit to the church belfry, it had been impossible to arrange meetings. Working hours had been drastically increased in anticipation of Hate Week. It was more than a month distant, but the enormous complex preparations that it entailed were throwing extra work onto everybody. Finally, both of them managed to secure a free afternoon on the same day. They had agreed to go back to the clearing in the wood. On the evening beforehand, they met briefly in the street. As usual, Winston hardly looked at Julia as they drifted toward one another in the crowd. But from the short glance he gave her, it seemed to him that she was paler than usual. "It's all off," she murmured as soon as she judged it safe to speak. "Tomorrow, I mean." "What?" "Tomorrow afternoon. I can't come." "Why not?" "Oh, the usual reason. It started early this time." For a moment he was violently angry. During the month that he had known her, the nature of his desire for her had changed. At the beginning there had been little true sensuality in it. Their first lovemaking had been simply an act of the will. But after the second time it was different. The smell of her hair, the taste of her mouth, the feeling of her skin seemed to have got inside him, or into the air all round him. She had become a physical necessity, something that he had not only wanted, but felt that he had a right to. When she said that she could not come, he had the feeling that she was cheating on him. But just at this moment the crowd pressed them together, and their hands accidentally met. She gave the tips of his fingers a quick squeeze that seemed to invite not desire, but affection. It struck him that when one lived with a woman, this particular disappointment must be a normal recurring event, and a deep tenderness, such as he had not felt for her before, suddenly took hold of him. He wished that they were a married couple of 10 years' standing. He wished that they were walking through the streets with her just as they were doing now, but openly and without fear, talking of trivialities and buying odds and ends for the household. He wished above all that they had some place where they could be alone together without feeling the obligation to make love every time they met. It was not actually at that moment, but at some time on the following day, that the idea of renting Mr. Charrington's room had occurred to him. When he suggested it to Julia, she had agreed with unexpected readiness. Both of them knew that it was lunacy. It was as though they were intentionally stepping nearer to their graves. As he sat waiting on the edge of the bed, he thought again of the cellars of the Ministry of Love. It was curious how that predestined horror moved in and out of one's consciousness. There it lay, fixed in time, preceding death as surely as 99 precedes 100. It just started storming outside, like, violently. That scared me. I was like, what is that? Is there a car wreck outside? No. It's just the weather. Sorry. Okay. One could not avoid it, but one could perhaps postpone it. And instead, every now and again, by a conscious, willful act, one chose to shorten the interval before it happened. At this moment, there was a quick step on the stairs. Julia burst into the room. She was carrying a tool bag of coarse brown canvas, such as he had sometimes seen her carrying to and fro at the ministry. He started forward to take her in his arms, but she disengaged herself rather hurriedly, partly because she was still holding the tool bag. "Half a second," she said. "Just let me show you what I've brought. Did you bring some of that filthy Victory coffee? I thought you would. You can chuck it away again, because we shan't need it. Look here." She fell on her knees, threw open the bag, and tumbled out some spanners and a screwdriver that filled the top part of it. Underneath was a number of neat paper packets. The first packet that she passed to Winston had a strange and yet vaguely familiar feeling. It was filled with some kind of heavy sand-like stuff which yielded whenever you touched it. "It isn't sugar," he said. "Real sugar, not saccharin sugar. And here's a loaf of bread, proper white bread, not our bloody stuff, and a little pot of jam. And here's a tin of milk. But look, this is the one I'm really proud of. I had to wrap a bit of sacking around it because... Oh, sorry, I'm dying. But she did not need to tell him why she had wrapped it up. The smell was already filling the room, a rich, hot smell which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood, but which one did occasionally meet with even now, blowing down a passageway before a door slammed, or diffusing itself mysteriously in a crowded street, sniffed for an instant and then lost again. "It's coffee," he murmured. "Real coffee." "It's inter-party coffee. There's a whole kilo here," she said. "How did you manage to get a hold of all these things?" "It's all inter-party stuff. There's nothing worse. There's nothing those swine don't have. Nothing. But of course waiters and servants and people pinch things. And look, I got a little packet of tea as well." Winston had squatted down beside her. He tore open a corner of the packet. "It's real tea, not blackberry leaves." "There's been a lot of tea about lately. They've captured India or something," she said vaguely. "But listen, dear, I want you to turn your back on me for 3 minutes. Go and sit on the other side of the bed. Don't go too near the window, and don't turn round till I tell you." Winston gazed abstractedly through the muslin curtain. Down in the yard, the red-armed woman was still marching to and fro between the washtub and the line. She took 2 more pegs out of her mouth and sang with deep feeling. "They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and the tears across the years, they twist my earstrings yet." She knew the whole drivelling song by heart, it seemed. Her voice floated upward with a sweet summer air, very tuneful, charged with a sort of happy melancholy. One had the feeling that she would have been perfectly content if the June evening had been endless and the supply of clothes inexhaustible, to remain there for 1,000 years, pegging out diapers and singing rubbish. It struck him as a curious fact that he had never heard a member of the party singing alone and spontaneously. It would even have seemed slightly unorthodox, a dangerous eccentricity, like talking to oneself. Perhaps it was only when people were somewhere near the starvation level that they had anything to sing about. "You can turn around now," said Julia. He turned round, and for a second almost failed to recognize her. What he had actually expected was to see her naked. But she was not naked. The transformation that had happened was much more surprising than that. She had painted her face. She must have slipped into some shop in the porcelain quarters and bought herself a complete set of makeup materials. Her lips were deeply reddened, her cheeks rouged, her nose powdered. There was even a touch of something under the eyes to make them brighter. It was not very skillfully done, but Winston's standards in such matters were not high. He had never before seen or imagined a woman of the party with cosmetics on her face. The improvement in her appearance was startling. With just a few dabs of color in the right places, she had become not only very much prettier, but above all, far more feminine. Her short hair and boyish overalls merely added to the effect. As he took her in his arms, a wave of synthetic violets flooded his nostrils. He remembered the half-darkness of a basement kitchen and a woman's cavernous mouth. It was the very same scent that she had used, but at the moment it did not seem to matter. "Scent, too," he said. "Yes, dear, scent, too. And you know what I'm going to do next? I'm going to get hold of a real woman's frock from somewhere and wear it instead of these bloody trousers. I'll wear silk stockings and high-heeled shoes. In this room, I'm going to be a woman, not a party comrade." They flung their clothes off and climbed into the huge mahogany bed. It was the first time that he had stripped himself naked in her presence. Until now, he had been too much ashamed of his pale and meager body. There's like some serious lightning going on outside. Woo! Until now, he had been too much ashamed of his pale and meager body, with the varicose veins standing out on his calves and the discolored patch over his ankle. There were no sheets, but the blanket they lay on was threadbare and smooth, and the size and springiness of the bed astonished both of them. "It's sure to be full of bugs, but who cares?" said Julia. "One never saw a double bed nowadays, except in the homes of the proles." Winston had occasionally slept in one in his boyhood. Julia had never been in one before, so far as she could remember. Presently they fell asleep for a little while. When Winston woke up, the hands of the clock had crept round to nearly 9. He did not stir because Julia was sleeping with her head in the crook of his arm. Most of her makeup had transferred itself to his own face or the bolster, but a light stain of rouge still brought out the beauty of her cheekbone. A yellow ray from the sinking sun fell across the foot of the bed and lighted up the fireplace, where the water in the pan was boiling fast. Down in the yard, the woman had stopped singing, but the faint shouts of children floated in from the street. He wondered vaguely whether in the abolished past it had been a normal experience to lie in bed like this, in the cool of a summer evening, a man and a woman with no clothes on, making love when they chose, talking of what they chose, not feeling any compulsion to get up, simply lying there and listening to peaceful sounds outside. Surely there could never have been a time when that seemed ordinary. Julia woke up, rubbed her eyes, and raised herself on her elbow to look at the oil stove. "Half that water's boiled away," she said. "I'll get up and make some coffee in another moment." "We've got an hour. What time do they cut the lights off at your flats?" 23:30. "It's 23 at the hostel, but you have to get in earlier than that because—" "Hey, get out, you filthy brute." She suddenly twisted herself over in bed and seized a shoe from the floor and sent it hurtling into the corner with a boyish jerk of her arm, exactly as he had seen her fling the dictionary at Goldstein that morning during the 2 minutes hate. "What was it?" he said in surprise. "A rat. I saw him stick his beastly nose out of the wainscoting. There's a hole down there. I gave him a good fright anyway." "Rats," murmured Winston. "In this room?" "They're all over the place," said Julia indifferently as she lay down again. "We've got them in the kitchen at the hostel. Some parts of London are swarming with them. Did you know they attack children?" "Yes, they do. In some of these streets a woman daren't leave a baby alone for 2 minutes. It's the great huge brown ones that do it. And the nasty thing is that the brutes always—" There is a kitty crying. Should we have a kitty break? Should we have a kitty break? Hold, please, and I shall fetch a kitty. We have a kitty here. Are you not feeling social? Huh? Oh, she's like, "I hide. I do not wish to be on camera. I wish to hide." She's like, "I want to be in here and I want attention, but not that kind of attention." Okay. "Don't go on," said Winston, his eyes tightly shut. "Dearest, you've gone quite pale. What's the matter? Did they make you feel sick?" Of all the horrors in the world, a rat. She pressed herself against him and wound her limbs round him, as though to reassure him with the warmth of her body. He did not reopen his eyes immediately. For several moments he had the feeling of being back in the nightmare which had recurred from time to time throughout his life. It was always very much the same. He was standing in front of a wall of darkness, and on the other side of it there was something unendurable, something too dreadful to be faced. In the dream, his deepest feeling was always one of self-deception, because he did in fact know what was behind the wall of darkness. With a deadly effort, like wrenching a piece out of his own brain. He could even have dragged the thing into the open. He always woke up without discovering what it was, but somehow it was connected with what Julia had been saying when he cut her short. I'm sorry, he said. It's nothing. I don't like rats, that's all. Don't worry, dear. We're not going to have the filthy brutes in here. I'll stuff the hole with a bit of sacking before we go. And next time you come here, I'll bring some plaster and bung it up properly. Already, the black instant of panic was half forgotten. Feeling slightly ashamed of himself, he sat against the bed head. Julia got out of bed, pulled on her overalls, and made the coffee. The smell that rose from the saucepan was so powerful and exciting that they shut the window lest anybody outside should notice it and become inquisitive. What was even better than the taste of the coffee was the silky texture given to it by the sugar, a thing Winston had almost forgotten after years of saccharin. With one hand in her pocket and a piece of bread and jam in the other, Julia wandered about the room, glancing indifferently at the bookcase, pointing out the best way of repairing the gate-leg table, plumping herself down in the ragged armchair to see if it was comfortable, and examining the absurd 12-hour clock with a sort of tolerant amusement. She brought the glass paperweight over to the bed to have a look at it in better light. He took it out of her hand, fascinated, as always, by the soft, rainwatery appearance of the glass. What is it, do you think? Said Julia. I don't think it's anything. I mean, I don't think it was ever put to any use. That's what I like about it. It's a little chunk of history that they've forgotten to alter. It's a message from 100 years ago, if one knew how to read it. And that picture over there, she nodded at the engraving on the opposite wall. Would that be 100 years old? More. Maybe 200, I dare say. One can't tell. It's impossible to discover the age of anything nowadays. She went over to look at it. Here's where that brute stuck his nose out, she said, kicking the wainscoting immediately below the picture. What is this place? I've seen it before somewhere. It's a church, or at least it used to be. St. Clement's Dame, its name was. The fragment of rhyme that Mr. Charrington had taught him came back into his head, and he added half nostalgically, Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. To his astonishment, she capped the line. You owe me 3 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. When will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey. I can't remember how it goes after that, but anyway, I remember it ends up, here comes a candle to light you to bed, here comes a chopper to chop off your head. It was like the 2 halves of a countersign, but there must be another line after the bells of Old Bailey. Perhaps it could be dug out of Mr. Charrington's memory if he were suitably prompted. Who taught you that? He said. My grandfather. He used to say it to me when I was a little girl. He was vaporized when I was 8. At any rate, he disappeared. I wonder what a lemon was, she added inconsequently. I've seen oranges. They're a kind of round yellow fruit with a thick skin. I can remember lemons, said Winston. They were quite common in the 50s. They were so sour that it set your teeth on edge even to smell them. I bet that picture's got bugs behind it, said Julia. I'll take it down and give it a good cleaning someday. I suppose it's almost time we were leaving. I must start washing this paint off. What a bore. I'll get the lipstick off your face afterwards. Winston did not get up for a few minutes more. The room was darkening. He turned over toward the light and lay gazing into the glass paperweight. The inexhaustibly interesting thing was not the fragment of coral, but the interior of the glass itself. There was such a depth of it, and yet it was almost as transparent as air. It was as though the surface of the glass had been the arch of the sky, enclosing a tiny world with its atmosphere complete. He had the feeling that he could get inside it, and that in fact he was inside it, along with the mahogany bed and the gate-leg table and the clock and the steel engraving and the paperweight itself. The paperweight was the room he was in, and the coral was Julia's life and his own, fixed in a sort of eternity at the heart of the crystal. Syme had vanished. Oh no. Sorry, this is chapter 5. Chapter 5. Syme had vanished. A morning came and he was missing from work. A few thoughtless people commented on his absence. On the next day, nobody mentioned him. On the 3rd day, Winston went into the vestibule of the records department to look at the notice board. One of the notices carried a printed list of the members of the chess committee, of whom Syme had been one. It looked almost exactly as it had before. Nothing had been crossed out, but it was one name shorter. It was enough. Syme had ceased to exist. He had never existed. The weather was baking hot. In the labyrinthine ministry, the windowless, air-conditioned rooms kept their normal temperature, but outside the pavement scorched one's feet, and the stench of the tubes at the rush hours was a horror. The preparations for Hate Week were in full swing, and the staffs of all the ministries were working overtime. Processions, meetings, military parades, lectures, waxwork displays, film shows, telescreens, programs all had to be organized. Stands had to be erected, effigies built, slogans coined, songs written, rumors circulated, photographs faked. Julia's unit in the fiction department had been taken off the production of novels and was rushing out a series of atrocity pamphlets. Winston, in addition to his regular work, spent long periods every day in going through back files of the Times and altering and embellishing news items, which were to be quoted in speeches. Late at night, when crowds of rowdy proles roamed the streets, the town had a curiously febrile air. The rocket bombs crashed oftener than ever, and sometimes in the far distance there were enormous explosions which no one could explain and about which there were wild rumors. The new song, which was to be the theme song of Hate Week, the Hate Song it was called, had already been composed and was being endlessly plugged on the telescreens. It had a savage barking rhythm which could not exactly be called music, but resembled the beating of a drum. Roared out by hundreds of voices to the tramp of marching feet, it was terrifying. The proles had taken a fancy to it, and in the midnight streets it competed with the still popular It Was Only a Hopeless Fancy. The parson's children played it at all hours of the night and day, unbearably, on a comb and a piece of toilet paper. Winston's evenings were fuller than ever. Squads of volunteers, organized by parsons, were preparing the street for Hate Week, stitching banners, painting posters, erecting flagstaffs on the roofs, and perilously slinging wires across the street for the reception of streamers. Parsons boasted that Victory Mansions alone would display 400 meters of bunting. He was in his native element and was happy as a lark. The heat and the manual work had given him a pretext for reverting to shorts and an open shirt in the evenings. He was everywhere at once, pushing, pulling, sawing, hammering, improvising, jollying everyone along with comradely exhortations, and giving out every fold of his body what seemed an inexhaustible supply of acrid-smelling sweat. A new poster had suddenly appeared all over London. It had no caption and represented simply the monstrous figure of a Eurasian soldier, 3 or 4 meters high, striding forward with expressionless Mongolian face and enormous boots, a submachine gun pointed from his hip. From whatever angle you looked at the poster, the muzzle of the gun, magnified by the foreshortening, seemed to be pointed straight at you. The thing had been plastered on every blank space on every wall, even outnumbering the portraits of Big Brother. The proles, normally apathetic about the war, were being lashed into one of their periodical frenzies of patriotism. As though to harmonize with the general mood, the rocket bombs had been killing larger numbers of people than usual. One fell on a crowded film theater in Stepney, burying several hundred victims among the ruins. The whole population of the neighborhood turned out for a long trailing funeral, which went on for hours and was in effect an indignation meeting. Another bomb fell on a piece of waste ground, which was used as a playground, and several dozen children were blown to pieces. Sorry. Whew. There were further angry demonstrations. Goldstein was burned in effigy. Hundreds of copies of the poster of the Eurasian soldier were torn down and added to the flames, and a number of shops were looted in the turmoil. Then a rumor flew that the spies were directing the rocket bombs by means of wireless waves, and an old couple who were suspected of being of foreign extraction had their house set on fire and perished of suffocation. In the room over Mr. Charrington's shop, when they could get there, Julia and Winston lay side by side on a stripped bed under the open window, naked for the sake of coolness. The rat had never come back, but the bugs had multiplied hideously in the heat. It did not seem to matter. Dirty or clean, the room was paradise. As soon as they arrived, they would sprinkle everything with pepper bought on the black market, tear off their clothes, and make love with sweating bodies, then fall asleep and wake to find the bugs had rallied and were massing for the counterattack. 4, 5, 6, 7 times they met during the month of June. Winston had dropped his habit of drinking gin at all hours. He seemed to have lost the need for it. He had grown fatter, his varicose ulcer had subsided, leaving only a brownish stain on the skin above his ankle. His fits of coughing in the early morning had stopped. The process of life had ceased to be intolerable. He had no longer any impulse to make faces at the telescreen or shout curses at the top of his voice. Now that they had a secure hiding place, almost a home, it did not even seem a hardship that they could only meet infrequently and for a couple of hours at a time. What mattered was that the room over the junk shop should exist. To know that it was there, inviolate, was almost the same as being in it. The room was a world, a pocket of the past where extinct animals could walk. Mr. Charrington, thought Winston, was another extinct animal. He usually stopped to talk with Mr. Charrington for a few minutes on his way upstairs. The old man seemed seldom or never to go out of doors, and on the other hand to have almost no customers. He led a ghost-like existence between the tiny dark shop and an even tinier back kitchen where he prepared his meals, and which contained, among other things, an unbelievably ancient gramophone with an enormous horn. He seemed glad of the opportunity to talk. Wandering about his worthless stock, with his long nose and thick spectacles and his bowed shoulders in the velvet jacket, he had always vaguely the air of being a collector rather than a tradesman. With a sort of faded enthusiasm, he would finger this scrap of rubbish or that, a china bottle stopper, the painted lid of a broken snuff box, a pinchbeck locket containing a strand of some long dead baby's hair, never asking that Winston should buy it, merely that he should admire it. Oh, I got the sniffles all of a sudden. How are we doing, chat? How are we hanging? I think we're going to take a little break after this next chapter. I think. To talk to him was like listening to the tinkling of a worn-out musical box. He had dragged out from the corners of his memory some fragments of forgotten rhymes. There was one about 24 blackbirds, and another about a cow with a crumpled horn, and another about the death of poor Cock Robin. It just occurred to me you might be interested, he would say with a depreciating little laugh whenever he produced a new fragment, but he could never recall more than a few lines of any one rhyme. Both of them knew, in a way, it was never out of their minds, that what was now happening could not last long. There were times when the fact of impending death seemed as palpable as the bed they lay on, and they would cling together with a sort of despairing sensuality, like a damned soul grasping at his last morsel of pleasure when the clock is within 5 minutes of striking. But there were also times when they had the illusion not only of safety but of permanence. So long as they were actually in this room, they both felt, no harm could come to them. Getting there was difficult and dangerous, but the room itself was sanctuary. It was as when Winston had gazed into the heart of the paperweight, with the feeling that it would be possible to get stuck inside that glassy world, and then once inside, time could be arrested. Often they gave themselves up to daydreams of escape. Their luck would hold indefinitely, and they would carry on their tongue just like this for the remainder of their natural lives. Or Catherine would die, and by subtle maneuverings, Winston and Julia would succeed in getting married. Or they could commit suicide together, learn to speak with proletarian accents, get jobs in a factory, and... Wow, I skipped a full line. I am so sorry. Or they could commit suicide together, or they would disappear, alter themselves out of recognition, learn to speak with proletarian accents, get jobs in a factory, and live out their lives undetected in a back street. It was all nonsense, as they both knew. In reality, there was no escape. Even the one plan that was practical, suicide, they had no intention of carrying out. To hang on from day to day and from week to week, spinning out a present that had no future, seemed an unconquerable instinct. Just as one's lungs always drew the next breath, so long as the air is available. Sometimes, too, they talked of engaging in active rebellion against the party, but with no notion of how to make the first step. Even if the fabulous brotherhood was a reality, there still remained the difficulty of finding one's way into it. He told her of the strange intimacy that existed, or seemed to exist, between himself and O'Brien. and the impulse he sometimes felt simply to walk into Brian's presence, announced that he was the enemy of the party and demand his help. Curiously enough, this did not strike her as an impossibly rash thing to do. She was used to judging people by their faces, and it seemed natural to her that Winston should believe O'Brien to be trustworthy on the strength of a single flash of the eyes. Moreover, she took it for granted that everyone, or nearly everyone, secretly hated the party and would break the rules if he thought it safe to do so. But she refused to believe that widespread, organized opposition existed or could exist. The tales about Goldstein and his underground army, she said, were simply a lot of rubbish which the party had invented for its own purposes, and which you had to pretend to believe in. Times beyond number, at party rallies and spontaneous demonstrations, she had shouted at the top of her voice for the execution of people whose names she had never heard and in whose supposed crimes she had not the faintest belief. When public trials were happening, she had taken her place in the detachments from the Youth League, who surrounded the courts from morning to night, chanting at intervals, "Death to the traitors." During the 2 minutes' hate, she always excelled all others in shouting insults at Goldstein. Yet she had only the dimmest idea of who Goldstein was and what doctrines he was supposed to represent. She had grown up since the Revolution and was too young to remember the ideological battles of the 50s and 60s. Such a thing as an independent political movement was outside her imagination, and in any case the party was invincible. It would always exist, and it would always be the same. You could only rebel against it by secret disobedience, or at most by isolated acts of violence, such as killing somebody or blowing something up. In some ways, she was far more acute than Winston, and far less susceptible to party propaganda. Once, when he happened in some connection to mention the war against Eurasia, she startled him by saying casually that in her opinion the war was not happening. The rocket bombs which fell daily on London were probably fired by the government of Oceania itself, just to keep the people frightened. "Oh, Soul, I love you, baby. I'm sorry you're cursed. I did not hex you this time, I swear. It was not me." This was an idea that had literally never occurred to him. She also stirred a sort of envy in him by telling him that during the 2 minutes' hate, her great difficulty was to avoid bursting out laughing. But she only questioned the teachings of the party when they in some way touched upon her own life. Often she was ready to accept the official mythology simply because the difference between truth and falsehood did not seem important to her. She believed, for instance, having learned it at school, that the party had invented airplanes. In his own school days, Winston remembered in the late 50s, it was only the helicopter that the party claimed to have invented. A dozen years later, when Julia was at school, it was already claiming the airplane. 1 generation more, and it would be claiming the steam engine. When he told her that airplanes had been in existence before he was born, and long before the Revolution, the fact struck her as totally uninteresting. After all, what did it matter who had invented airplanes? It was rather more of a shock to him when he discovered from some chance remark that she did not remember that Oceania, 4 years ago, had been at war with East Asia and at peace with Eurasia. It was true that she regarded the whole war as a sham, but apparently she had not even noticed that the name of the enemy had changed. "I thought we'd always been at war with Eurasia," she said vaguely. It frightened him a little. The invention of airplanes dated from long before her birth, but the switchover in the war had happened only 4 years ago. Well, after she was grown up. He argued with her about it for perhaps a quarter of an hour. In the end, he succeeded in forcing her memory back until she did dimly recall that at one time East Asia and not Eurasia had been the enemy. But the issue still struck her as unimportant. "Who cares?" she said impatiently. "It's always one bloody war after another, and one knows the news is all lies anyway."
Hello? 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 Hello?
Hi, Walken. Welcome in. Hi, guys. How are you? Do I have a mod available who can shout out Walken? We were just taking a little tiny break because we're still gasping over the horrifying parallels in this. What were you up to? Yay, welcome to book club. You guys are only a little late to English class, but that's okay. I'll write you guys an excuse. I'll write you a hall pass. What were you playing? Anomaly Company? I haven't heard of that. Is that kind of like observation duty? Sounds interesting. Yeah, so we were just pausing because what was I just reading? The whole idea that the country is just kind of basically at war with itself, but blaming some random enemy and being like, they're the cause of our problems. They're the enemy. And everyone's just kind of like, yeah, okay. Meanwhile, the country is bombing its own people to convince them that other people are the enemy. Anyways. I played and beat Lemuria and then played Anomaly game. Oh, okay. That sounds fun. Well, Raiders, welcome in. I'm so glad you're here. Walk in if you need to raid and fade and go relax and all that jazz. Please do. Please go relax. Please go de-stress, de-stream. Take care of yourself. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for bringing your lovely community on over. Yeah. I needed to process that one. It's like every single chapter something comes up where I'm like, hey, that's a little too close to home. That's a little too relatable. Not loving that. Like, we literally just got done talking about, like, the way purity culture is portrayed in this book as a method of control. This stupid book. This stupid book is too relevant, y'all. We're going to take... Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish this chapter, and then we're going to take a little break. Little breaky break. So that I can have a snack and get some tea. And then we'll keep going. We're like... I want to say we're halfway through this book. We're kind of crushing it. Yeah, brownie break. Brownie break. This... If y'all ain't never read this book, you should read this book. You should read this book. Book club, every time we do book club, this book scares me a little more. Because, like, this is supposed to be dystopian fiction. And instead, it reads like a biography or something. Like, it reads like current events. It reads like a breaking news bulletin from the New York Times delivered straight to your email. And it's like, oh, that's just reality. That's just what we're doing now. Like, we were just talking about how in this book, they talk about having a machine that writes novels and produces entertainment for them. You put in a prompt, and it spits out the novel or the movie or the entertainment or the song. Like, George Orwell didn't know what artificial intelligence was, but he sure knew what artificial intelligence was. My man was calling out ChatGPT before ChatGPT was even a thought. Yeah. Okay. We only have like 2 pages left in this chapter, I think. Yeah, we only have 2 pages left in this chapter. So we'll just plug on through and then we'll take a little break. Sometimes he talked to her of the records department and the impudent forgeries that he committed there. Such things did not appear to horrify her. She did not feel the abyss opening beneath her at the thought of lies becoming truths. He told her the story of Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, and the momentous slip of paper which he had once held between his fingers. It did not make much impression on her. At first, indeed, she failed to grasp the point of the story. "Were they friends of yours?" she said. "No, I never knew them. They were inter-party members. Besides, they were far older men than I was. They belonged to the old days before the Revolution. I barely knew them by sight." "Then what was there to worry about? People are being killed off all the time, aren't they?" He tried to make her understand. This was an exceptional case. It wasn't just a question of somebody being killed. Do you realize that the past, starting from yesterday, has been actually abolished? If it survives anywhere, it's in a few solid objects with no words attached to them, like that lump of glass there. Already we know almost literally nothing about the revolution and the years before the revolution. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street and building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And that process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. I know, of course, that the past is falsified, but it would never be possible for me to prove it, even when I did the falsification myself. After the thing is done, no evidence ever remains. The only evidence is inside my own mind, and I don't know with any certainty that any other human being shares my memories. Just in that one instance in my whole life, I did possess actual concrete evidence after the event, years after it. And what good was that? It was no good because I threw it away a few minutes later. But if the same thing happened today, I should keep it. Well, I wouldn't, said Julia. I'm quite ready to take risks. But only for something worthwhile, not for bits of old newspaper. What could you have done with it, even if you had kept it? Not much, perhaps, but it was evidence. It might have planted a few doubts here and there, supposing that I dared to show it to anybody. I don't imagine that we can alter anything in our own lifetime, but one can imagine little knots of resistance springing up here and there, small groups of people banding themselves together and actually growing, and even leaving a few records behind, so that the next generation can carry on where we leave off. I'm not interested in the next generation, dear. I'm interested in us. You're only a rebel from the waist downwards, he told her. She thought this was brilliantly witty and flung her arms round him in delight. In the ramifications of party doctrine, she had not the faintest interest. Whenever he began talking of the principles of Ingsoc, doublethink, the mutability of the past, and the deniable objective reality, and to use newspeak words, she became bored and confused and said that she never paid any attention to that kind of thing. One knew that it was all rubbish, so why let oneself be worried by it? She knew when to cheer and when to boo, and that was all one needed. If he persisted in talking of such subjects, she had a disconcerting habit of falling asleep. She was one of those people who can go to sleep at any hour and in any position. Talking to her, he realized how easy it was to present an appearance of orthodoxy while having no grasp whatever of what orthodoxy meant. In a way, the worldview of the party imposed itself most successfully on people incapable of understanding it. They could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them and were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. By lack of understanding, they remained sane. They simply swallowed everything, and what they swallowed did them no harm because it left no residue beside, just as a grain of corn will pass undigested through the body of a bird. Have a good night, Walken. Thanks for being here. Get good sleeps. I'm about choking to death over here. So, let's talk about that last page. I need to discuss that last page a little bit. It's giving that slogan. The people who made the best Nazis were the people who just did nothing. They just went along with it. They just didn't care one way or the other. They just wanted to keep their head down and just cooperate. Like, it's giving people who like to say that they don't do politics. It's giving, I don't want to talk about it. It's giving, I don't like to be political. It's giving, I just want everybody to get along. That's what it's giving. You know what I'm saying? Like, she thinks that she's a rebel. She thinks that she's resisting. When really all she's doing is just getting by unnoticed and only resisting in ways that serve her. But she doesn't care about how all of this affects other people and how it will affect other people down the road. She's only interested in how rebelling serves her directly, and how if it won't serve her directly, then what's the harm in just letting it be? Like, why does it matter who invented the airplane? It doesn't. It doesn't matter to her because it doesn't affect her. And it doesn't affect daily life, really. But, like, it does? And she's not grasping that. So she likes to think that she's a rebel. But really, she just is selfish. Interesting. Very interesting. I have decided. Instead of taking a break right now, we are gonna power through one more chapter and then call it a night. Cause we're doing pretty good. We're a pretty good clip. We've gotten through a good chunk of this. I'd say we're halfway through. So let's see. So this is chapter 6. Oh, that's a short chapter. That's a shorty little chapter. Okay. We're going to power through 2 more chapters. Is what we're going to do. And then we will call it a night. I think. That's what I think. Okay. So, let's dive right into chapter 6. Shall we? It had happened at last. The expected message had come. All his life, it seemed to him, he had been waiting for this to happen. He was walking down the long corridor at the ministry, and he was almost at the spot where Julia had slipped the note into his hand when he became aware that someone larger than himself was walking just behind him. The person, whoever it was, gave a small cough, evidently as a prelude to speaking. Winston stopped abruptly and turned. It was O'Brien. At last they were face to face, and it seemed that his only impulse was to run away. His heart bounded violently. He would have been incapable of speaking. O'Brien, however, had continued forward in the same movement, laying a friendly hand for a moment on Winston's arm, so that the two of them were walking side by side. He began speaking with the peculiar grave courtesy that differentiated him from the majority of inner party members. I had been hoping for an opportunity of talking to you, he said. I was reading one of your Newspeak articles in the Times the other day. You take a scholarly interest in Newspeak, I believe? Winston had recovered part of his self-possession. Hardly scholarly, he said. I'm only an amateur. It's not my subject. I never had anything to do with the actual construction of the language. But you write it very elegantly, said O'Brien. That is not only my own opinion. I was talking recently to a friend of yours who is certainly an expert. His name has slipped my memory for a moment. Again, Winston's heart stirred painfully. It was inconceivable that this was anything other than a reference to Syme. But Syme was not only dead, he was abolished, an unperson. Any identifiable reference to him would have been mortally dangerous. O'Brien's remark must obviously have been intended as a signal, a code word. By sharing a small act of thought crime, he had turned the two of them into accomplices. They had continued to stroll slowly down the corridor, but now O'Brien halted, with the curious, disarming friendliness that he always managed to put into the gesture. He resettled his spectacles on his nose. Then he went on. What I had really intended to say was that in your article, I noticed you had used 2 words which have become obsolete, but they have only become so very recently. Have you seen the 10th edition of the Newspeak Dictionary? No, said Winston. I didn't think it had been issued yet. We are still using the 9th in the records department. The 10th edition is not due to appear for some months, I believe, but a few advance copies have been circulated. I have one myself. It might interest you to look at, perhaps? Very much so, said Winston, immediately seeing where this tended. Some of the new developments are most ingenious. The reduction in the number of verbs, that is the point that would appeal to you, I think. Let me see. Shall I send a messenger to you with the dictionary? But I am afraid I invariably forget anything of that kind. Perhaps you could pick it up at my flat sometime that suited you. Wait, let me give you my address. They were standing in front of a telescreen. Somewhat absent-mindedly, O'Brien felt 2 of his pockets, then produced a small leather-covered notebook and a gold ink pencil. Immediately beneath the telescreen, in such a position that anyone who was watching at the other end of the instrument could read what he was writing, he scribbled an address, tore out the page, and handed it to Winston. I am usually home in the evenings, he said. If not, my servant will give you the dictionary. He was gone, leaving Winston holding the scrap of paper, which this time there was no need to conceal. Nevertheless, he carefully memorized what was written on it, and some hours later dropped it into the memory hole, along with a mass of other papers. They had been talking to one another for a couple of minutes at the most. There was only one meaning that the episode could possibly have. It had been contrived as a way of letting Winston know O'Brien's address. This was necessary because, except by direct inquiry, it was never possible to discover where anyone lived. There were no directories of any kind. If you ever want to see me, this is where I can be found, was what O'Brien had been saying to him. Perhaps there would even be a message concealed somewhere in the dictionary. But at any rate, one thing was certain. The conspiracy that he dreamed of did exist, and he had reached the outer edges of it. He knew that sooner or later he would obey O'Brien's summons. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps after a long delay, he was not certain. What was happening was only the working out of a process that had started years ago. The first step had been a secret, involuntary thought. The second had been the opening of the diary. He had moved from thoughts to words, and now from words to actions. The last step was something that would happen in the ministry of love. He had accepted it. The end was contained in the beginning, but it was frightening, or more exactly, it was like a foretaste of death, like being a little less alive. Even while he was speaking to O'Brien, when the meaning of the words had sunk in, a chilly, shuddering feeling had taken the possession of his body. He had the sensation of stepping into the dampness of a grave, and it was not much better because he had always known that the grave was there waiting for him. Chapter 7. Hi, Hyrule. Chapter 7. Winston had woken up with his eyes full of tears. Julia rolled sleepily against him, murmuring something that might have been, "What's the matter?" "I dreamt," he began, and stopped short. It was too complex to be put into words. There was the dream itself, and there was a memory connected with it that had swum into his mind in the few seconds after waking. He lay back with his eyes shut, still sodden in the atmosphere of the dream. It was a vast, luminous dream in which his whole life seemed to stretch out before him like a landscape on a summer evening after rain. It had all occurred inside the glass paperweight, but the surface of the glass was the dome of the sky. And inside the dome, everything was flooded with soft, clear light in which one could see into the interminable distances. The dream had also been comprehended by, indeed, in some sense it had consisted in, a gesture of the arm made by his mother, and made again 30 years later by the Jewish woman he had seen on the news film, trying to shelter the small boy from the bullets before the helicopters blew them both to pieces. "Do you know," he said, "that until this moment I believed I had murdered my mother?" "Why did you murder her?" said Julia, almost asleep. "I didn't murder her. Not physically." In the dream he had remembered his last glimpse of his mother, and within a few moments of waking, the cluster of small events surrounding it had all come back. It was a memory that he must have deliberately pushed out of his consciousness over many years. He was not certain of the date, but he could not have been less than 10 years old, possibly 12 when it had happened. His father had disappeared some time earlier. How much earlier he could not remember. He remembered better the rackety, uneasy circumstances of the time, the periodical panics about air raids, and the sheltering in tube stations, the piles of rubble everywhere, the unintelligible proclamations posted at street corners, the gangs of youths in shirts all the same color, the enormous queues outside the bakeries, the intermittent machine gun fire in the distance, above all, the fact that there was never enough to eat. He remembered long afternoons spent with other boys in scrounging around dustbins and rubbish heaps, picking out the ribs of cabbage leaves, potato peelings, sometimes even scraps of stale bread crust, from which they carefully scraped away the cinders, and also in waiting for the passing of trucks which traveled over a certain route and were known to carry cattle feed, and which, when they jolted over the bad patches in the road, sometimes spilt a few fragments of oil cake. When his father disappeared, his mother did not show any surprise or any violent grief, but a sudden change came over her. She seemed to have become completely spiritless. It was evident even to Winston that she was waiting for something that she knew must happen. She did everything that was needed: cooked, washed, mended, made the bed, swept the floor, dusted the mantelpiece, always very slowly and with a curious lack of superfluous motion, like an artist's lay figure moving of its own accord. Her large, shapely body seemed to relapse naturally into stillness. For hours at a time she would sit, almost immobile, on the bed, nursing his younger sister, a tiny, ailing, very silent child of 2 or 3, with a face made simian by thinness. Very occasionally she would take Winston in her arms and press him against her for a long time without saying anything. He was aware, in spite of his youthfulness and selfishness, that this was somehow connected with the never-mentioned thing that was about to happen. He remembered the room where they lived, a dark, close-smelling room that seemed half-filled by a bed with a white counterpane. There was a gas ring in the fender and a shelf where food was kept, and on the landing outside there was a brown earthenware sink, common to several rooms. He remembered his mother's statuesque body bending over the gas ring to stir something in the saucepan. Above all, he remembered his continuous hunger and the fierce sordid battles at mealtimes. He would ask his mother naggingly over and over again why there was not more food. He would shout and storm at her. He even remembered the tones of his voice, which was beginning to break prematurely, and sometimes boomed in a peculiar way. Or he would attempt a sniveling note of pathos in his efforts to get more than his share. His mother was quite ready to give him more than his share. She took it for granted that he, the boy, should have the biggest portion, but however much she gave him, he invariably demanded more. At every meal she would beseech him not to be selfish and to remember that his little sister was sick and also needed food. But it was no use. He would cry out with rage when she stopped ladling. He would try to wrench the saucepan and spoon out of her hands. He would grab bits from his sister's plate. He knew that he was starving the other two, but he could not help it. He even felt that he had a right to it. The clamorous hunger in his belly seemed to justify him. Between meals, if his mother did not stand guard, he was constantly pilfering at the wretched store of food on the shelf. One day a chocolate ration was issued. There had been no such issue for weeks or months past. He remembered quite clearly that precious little morsel of chocolate. It was a 2-ounce slab. They still talked about ounces in those days. Between the 3 of them, it was obvious that it ought to be divided into 3 equal parts. Suddenly, as though he were listening to somebody else, Winston heard himself demanding in a loud, booming voice that he should be given the whole piece. His mother told him not to be greedy. There was a long, nagging argument that went round and round, with shouts, whines, tears, remonstrances, bargainings. His tiny sister, clinging to her mother with both hands, exactly like a baby monkey, sat looking over her shoulder at him with large, mournful eyes. In the end, his mother broke off 3/4 of the chocolate and gave it to Winston, giving the other quarter to his sister. The little girl took hold of it and looked at it dully, perhaps not knowing what it was. Winston stood watching her for a moment. Then with a sudden swift spring he snatched the piece of chocolate out of his sister's hand and was fleeing for the door. Winston, his mother called after him. Come back. Give your sister back her chocolate. He stopped, but he did not come back. His mother's anxious eyes were fixed on his face. Even now she was thinking about the thing. He did not know what it was that was on the point of happening. His sister, conscious of having been robbed of something, had set up a feeble wail. His mother drew her arm round the child and pressed its face against her breast. Something in the gesture told him that his sister was dying. He turned and fled down the stairs, the chocolate growing sticky in his hand. He never saw his mother again. After he had devoured the chocolate, he felt somewhat ashamed of himself and hung about in the street for several hours until hunger drove him home. When he came back, his mother had disappeared. This was already becoming normal at that time. Nothing was gone from the room except his mother and his sister. They had not taken any clothes, not even his mother's overcoat. To this day, he did not know with any certainty that his mother was dead. It was perfectly possible that she had merely been sent to a forced labor camp. As for his sister, she might have been removed, like Winston himself, to one of the colonies for homeless children. Reclamation centers, they were called, which had grown up as a result of the Civil War. Or she might have been sent to the labor camp along with his mother, or simply left somewhere or other to die. The dream was still vivid in his mind, especially the enveloping, protecting gesture of the arm, in which its whole meaning seemed to be contained. His mind went back to another dream of 2 months ago. Exactly as his mother had sat on the dingy white quilted bed, and the child clinging to her, so she had sat in the sunken ship, far underneath him and drowning deeper every minute, but still looking up at him through the darkening water. He told Julia the story of his mother's disappearance. Without opening her eyes, she rolled over and settled herself into a more comfortable position. "I expect you were a beastly little swine in those days," she said indistinctly. "All children are swine." "Yes, but the point of the story." From her breathing, it was evident that she was going off to sleep again. He would have liked to continue talking about his mother. He did not suppose, from what he could remember of her, that she had been an unusual woman, still less an intelligent one, and yet she had possessed a kind of nobility, a kind of purity, simply because the standards that she obeyed were private ones. Her feelings were her own, and she could not be altered from outside. It would not have occurred to her that an action which is ineffectual thereby becomes meaningless. If you loved someone, you loved him, and when you had nothing else to give, you still gave him love. When the last of the chocolate was gone, his mother had clasped the child in her arms. It was no use, it changed nothing, it did not produce more chocolate. It did not avert the child's death or her own, but it seemed natural to her to do it. The refugee woman in the boat had also covered the little boy with her arm, which was no more use against bullets than a sheet of paper. The terrible thing that the party had done was to persuade you that mere impulses, mere feelings were of no account, while at the same time robbing you of all power over the material world. When once you were in the grip of the party, what you felt or did not feel, what you did or refrained from doing, made literally no difference. Whatever happened, you vanished, and neither you nor your actions were ever heard of again. You were lifted clean out of the stream of history, and yet to the people of only 2 generations ago this would not have seemed all important, because they were not attempting to alter history. They were governed by private loyalties, which they did not question. What mattered were individual relationships, and a completely helpless gesture, an embrace, a tear, a word spoken to a dying man, could have value in itself. The proles, it suddenly occurred to him, had remained in this condition. They were not loyal to a party or a country or an idea. They were loyal to one another. For the first time in his life, he did not despise the proles or think of them merely as an inert force which would one day spring to life and regenerate the world. The proles had stayed human. They had not become hardened inside. They had held on to the primitive emotions, which he himself had to relearn by conscious effort. And in thinking this, he remembered, without apparent relevance, how a few weeks ago he had seen a severed hand lying on the pavement and kicked it into the gutter as though it had been a cabbage stalk. "The proles are human beings," he said aloud. "We are not human." "Why not?" said Julia, who had woken up again. He thought for a little while. "Has it ever occurred to you," he said, "that the best thing for us to do would be simply to walk out of here before it's too late and never see each other again?" "Yes, dear, it has occurred to me several times, but I'm not going to do it all the same." "We've been lucky," he said, "but it can't last much longer. You're young, you look normal and innocent. If you keep clear of people like me, you might stay alive for another 50 years. "No, I've thought it all out. What you do, what I'm going to do, and don't be too downhearted. I'm rather good at staying alive." We may be together for another 6 months, a year. There's no knowing. At the end, we're certain to be apart. Do you realize how utterly alone we shall be? When once they get a hold of us, there will be nothing, literally nothing, that either of us can do for the other. If I confess, they'll shoot you. And if I refuse to confess, they'll shoot you just the same. Nothing that I can do or say or stop myself from saying will put off your death for as much as 5 minutes. Neither of us will even know whether the other is alive or dead. We shall be utterly without power of any kind. The only thing that matters is that we shouldn't betray one another, although even that can't make the slightest difference. If you mean confessing, she said, we shall do that right enough. Everybody always confesses. You can't help it. They torture you. I don't mean confessing. Confession is not betrayal. What you say or do doesn't matter. Only feelings matter. If they can make me stop loving you, that would be the real betrayal. She thought it over. They can't do that, she said finally. It's the one thing they can't do. They can make you say anything, but they can't make you believe it. They can't get inside you. No, he said a little more hopefully. No, that's quite true. They can't get inside of you. If you can feel that staying human is worthwhile, even when it can't have any result whatever, you've beaten them. He thought of the telescreen with its never-sleeping ear. They could spy upon you day and night, but if you kept your head, you could still outwit them. With all their cleverness, they had never mastered the secret of finding out what another human being was thinking. Perhaps that was less true when you were actually in their hands. One did not know what happened inside the Ministry of Love, but it was possible to guess. Tortures, drugs, delicate instruments that registered your nervous reactions, gradual wearing down by sleeplessness and solitude and persistent questioning. Facts, at any rate, could not be kept hidden. They could be tracked down by inquiry. They could be squeezed out of you by torture. But if the object was not to stay alive, but to stay human, what difference did it ultimately make? They could not alter your feelings. For the matter, you could not alter them yourself, even if you wanted to. They could lay bare in the utmost detail everything that you had done or said or thought, but the inner heart, whose workings were mysterious even to yourself, remained impregnable. Y'all, that's the point.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Hi, Spicy.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? Hobbs says hi, gives him a kiss. The biscuit factory has been slow due to his slow production. Incredible. Hi, Gobbo. How are we doing, y'all? Okay, let's discuss that. Because that's the whole damn point. Okay, where's that sentence I really liked? Thank you for the resub, Gobbo. I appreciate you. Okay, where's that sentence I really liked? Because there was a really good one in there. What you say or
I
do...
volunteer as tribute.
Yes, that. Also that. Let's see. What you say or do doesn't matter. Only feelings matter. If they could make me stop loving you, that would be the real betrayal. And then there was another one. It was... I gotta find it. There was such a good sentence in here that was talking about how, like, yeah, maybe our small actions of rebellion don't really do much, or we're like, hey, I'm not making a difference because, like, what I just did is so small. What I just did can't possibly matter in the long run. But the fact that we did the thing, the fact that we participated in the act of rebellion, and the fact that we kept that emotion, and the fact that we wanted to make a difference, and the fact that we wanted to do good, that's what keeps us human. And that is the rebellion itself. Because if we just sort of like are okay with it and just go along with what they tell us to do and what to feel and what to think and what to read and what to consume, if we just go along with it because it's easier, that is when they succeed. They only succeed if we give in to their demands that we just give up. even if our small acts of rebellion don't add up to anything, the fact that we are still actively rebelling means that they are not winning. It means that they cannot ever really win because we're retaining our humanity. Does that make sense? Like, maybe the point isn't to have some massive rebellion overthrowing the corruption. Maybe the point is to maintain these small, consistent acts of rebellion because they can't stop it, and therefore they ultimately still lose. Am I losing you? The point is to keep trying. And that's how we retain our humanity. If we fail to retain our humanity, that's when it's all game over. When we stop seeing other human beings as valuable, and when we lose that perspective, and when we become like dissociated from the reality of that connection, that's when they win. Because think about the political discourse that's happened so much over the past, you name it, how many years. They want you to think that your immigrant neighbor doesn't deserve to be here because they're here illegally, they're bad, they're evil, they're taking your jobs. The reason your life in America is bad is because they are here. And so they want you to dehumanize them. Like they were talking about with the proles. They want you to dehumanize them. But the act of dehumanizing them is what dehumanizes us. It detracts from our humanity as soon as we start seeing other human beings as less than. So I'm not saying that it's okay that, Big Brother is making us do all these things. It's not okay that Big Brother is acting this way, is treating us this way, is making us think this way. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it is okay if your small act of rebellion doesn't make a difference in the long run, because it does. Because it preserves your humanity. So that is the rebellion. Good stuff. Good stuff. Lots to think about. I am really liking this book. It's not going the way I thought it would go. Like it is, but it isn't. The love story of it is really intriguing. Because is it love? Or is he just seeing what rebellion really looks like because he's realizing that her rebellion is not what rebellion is? I know that was a total non-sentence, but I stand by it. Her so-called rebellion was actually her just seeing what she can get away with while staying off the radar. Whereas his vision of rebellion is actually making a difference. And she doesn't understand why that matters. I think she's here to provide the contrast. It's like I was saying. It's like, I have a personal example. I was talking through all of this stuff to somebody who's very close to me, but they're a family member, but they are very much not of the same mindset as me. And she said, all of this is taking such a drain on your mental health, and none of what you're doing is actually going to stop what's happening. So And it's going to happen regardless of how many petitions you sign or regardless of how much money you raise for fundraisers. It's going to happen no matter what you do. So why are you still doing this to yourself? And this book is putting that conversation into even better perspective for me. Is we have to keep doing these small acts of rebellion so that we maintain our humanity. We maintain our perspective. We maintain our sense of rightness, I guess. Again, it all goes back to the people who made the best Nazis were the people who just stood by and let the Nazis do their thing without putting up resistance because they felt like, well, it's not like they can do anything to fix this. It's not like what they do is going to have an impact. So why do anything at all? And because there were so many people like that, that's why these things happened. That's why Hitler was able to maintain such a high level of power. That's why he was able to get away with what he did. Because so many people were like, well, it's not like I can do anything about it. This is going to happen whether I want it to or not. So I'm just going to keep my head down and stay out of trouble and just do what the law tells me to do. So yeah, this is such a good book. Okay, I think this book has about 2 more sessions in it because it's taken us, this is our 3rd session and we just hit halfway. I want to say, let's see, we're on page 148. We're on page 148 of 266. So we're like a little more than 100 pages out. And then there's like a whole appendix back here. Oh my gosh. There's a whole appendix back here on the principles of Newspeak. And then there's the 75th anniversary afterward. I don't know that we're going to read all of this. We probably won't read like the appendix and the afterword. So yeah, we're on page 148 of 266. So I think just a couple more sessions in this guy. And then after that, is Soul still having audio issues? If so, that's okay. But after we finish this guy, we're doing Sunrise on the Reaping, and Soul is actually going to read it with us. We're going to do sort of a shared book club night, and that's going to be really fun. It'll probably be like this, where it's every other week, or I'll just add on a stream night. Who's to say? And Acid might also be joining us for that. And we're all going to read it together and discuss it together. So if you aren't caught up on the Hunger Games, if you haven't read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I highly recommend you get your shit together and get that read so that we can read Sunrise on the Reaping together. Because that's going to be really good. I'm really, 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 really looking forward to doing that. So, okay. Good book club. Thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys letting me rant and get all my frustrations out and read a good book and discuss it with you guys. I have a lot of thoughts. And sometimes I just like to word vomit into the void. So thank you for listening to that. All right. Let's get out of here. Let's leave. Who's still up? Who's still up? Oh, it looks like Acid's still up, so we might just ship you guys on over there. There is you a raid message. Yeah, I'm just gonna ship you guys off to Acid's place for tonight, because that's just how I feel. Acid is doing some Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver. I think he's playing that with Neptune. So, yeah. All right, go be your wonderful, creepy little selves in Neptune's, or not in Neptune, in Acid's chat. Well, go say hi to Neptune too. Neptune's cool. Make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Get plenty of food. Get plenty of water. Take your freaking meds on time. I swear if you don't start taking your freaking meds on time. Go be the hope. Go be kind to a stranger. Go read a good book. Go educate yourselves. You know? It's important. It's important. I will see you guys actually not tomorrow night, but on Friday night. I'm doing some Dead by Daylight with our wonderful, lovely soul. Okay. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see y'all later. Okay, bye.